The first thing to remember about when preparing a CV is that you probably will only have 10 seconds to impress. It's a very, very competitive world out there with a lot of CVs up for each job, and therefore it's very, very important that you capture the recruiter and their decision-making process early and before they scroll. 10-second rule usually for me is before they scroll, because your CV will most likely be seen on a computer screen. So here's my 5 tips as to how to get the best out of your CV in that occasion. My first tip is to what I call optimize your CV. Now this is a kind of a rule that's used in website development and such like, but I think the same applies to your CV. What you've got to do is you've got to capture the recruiter early by making sure that the right keywords and the right phrases are used very, very early on in your CV in order to very quickly get that person to grasp your credibility and relevance for the role and allow them to want to read on. The minute you take a little bit too long on that and you get it wrong and you waste the top of your CV with some stuff that really doesn't matter around the job, you risk the potential of losing that person's interest in your CV. So make sure the keywords are right at the top of your CV that are relevant to the job that you're applying for and your experience. The second tip is to have a clear and concise introduction. This is really important to make sure that you set the scene as to who you are and what you're all about. What people are looking for very, very quickly is that ability to understand exactly who you are, what you've done and where you've done it. And therefore the introduction is a very, very important factor to set the scene correctly. It shouldn't be any longer than 2 or 3 lines long. If you get any longer than that, you start to lose the interest of the reader, and what you don't want to do is be losing their interest at this stage of the process. So make sure it's a clear, directed and concise introduction. My third tip is to make sure that you present yourself as unique. Now what this means is don't put this kind of stuff at the top of a CV that everybody else puts on. So phrases like great team player, great communication skills are nice, and I'm sure that you are a great team player and have great communication skills, but thousands and thousands of other people also write exactly the same thing, and what you're doing at the top of your CV is wasting important centimetres on stuff that doesn't set you apart from other people. So make sure that you put stuff at the top of the CV that is absolutely unique to you and your experience. Avoid the skill trap. So my fourth tip is to make sure you show your experience really early. So that means before they've scrolled, they need to see your current job and your most relevant job. Again, rather like the introduction, it makes sure that the credibility of who you are and what you've done is absolutely nailed on for the interviewer to see, or the recruiter to see, because it's really, really important that they can make that decision within that 10-second process, and that probably means they need to see what you've done really, really quickly. So make sure a relevant and important job is there. If you're a graduate and you haven't got that relevant experience, make sure that your degree is shown very, very clearly. Treat the presentation of your degree as if it were a job. Talk about the research and the projects that you've done and the deadlines you had to keep and the work that you had to do to get there. You've done a great job to complete your degree, so you've got to make sure that you show why and how you did it. My final advice is to ignore the 2-page advice that's out there. Many CV gurus who charge you 20 quid for their services will say that you must follow a 2-page rule. Now if you're a young 25-year-old, then that can work, but if you're a 40-year-old with 3 or 4 very, very influential and important jobs, it's really, really important to make sure that you present that in a way that gets the message across and shows the credibility of your skills and applications. Now sometimes that means drifting onto a 3rd page. Don't worry about that. The most important thing is to make sure that once people are now shortlisted you, you are presenting yourself as a credible option for interview. So make sure that you present your experience extremely well. And if that means you drift onto a 3rd page, do it. Ignore the 2-page advice, because it's not going to get you best presented sometimes for the roles you're going for.